Hello, I welcome you all to this talk. I am Sanket Barbade from CDC-R team. I have got opportunity to tell you briefly about CDC-R team, who we are and what we do. CDC-R is comparatively new team. Our aim is to create awareness among scholars, getting them known to opportunities and possibilities present in the institution, so that we can take more informed decision so that we can take more informed decisions about our career. We also want to inspire research scholars about the same and help them to prepare towards their goal. So how do we are helping and planning to help research scholars? Broadly we have classified all the areas into three categories. These are the three categories on your screen. So we plan to conduct events in all these three categories to create awareness among scholars. What are the opportunities available for them in the institution? And also, if they can come up with some idea, we can also help them conduct some events. So, what is CDC-R team? CDC-R team is classified into four subcategories. This event is being conducted with the help of entrepreneurship and mentorship team of CDC-R. So, all our collaboration and events related to entrepreneurship and mentorship initiatives are handled by these teams. Efforts are made to improve conversion of lab research to some business or startup, or how can scholars work. Also, mentoring is provided by experienced alumni and industry personnel to help scholars to decide their right career path and make more informed decisions. Our other three teams are events and workshop team, placement preparation team, and media and outreach team. So with this, I would like to close my short talk about CDCR. If you have any suggestions, anything, so that which will help research scholars, please reach out to any one of us. Our contacts are given here. Thank you. Over to e-cell team.
Thanks a lot, sir. That was informative. Next, we have Mr. Akshit from e-cell IIT Madras. I would like to call Mr. Akshit to represent on behalf of e-cell.
Hi Deepak, am I audible?
Yes, Akshit, you're audible.
And my screen is visible, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So hello everyone. So I would like to welcome all of you on the behalf of e-cell. And something about me. So I'm Akshit, and I'm currently co-heading the Entrepreneurship Cell, IIT Madras, along with Ayush, who is also in the call. So I would like to just give you a short introduction about e-cell and what are the activities which Entrepreneurship Cell has planned for all of you for the upcoming year. So this is the second consecutive year where we are doing specially curated event only for research scholars and PhD scholars. So really excited to meet all of you. So moving on, so you might have read about e-cell. So what we do is we empower or we evangelize entrepreneurship within the institute. So if you go by numbers, so there are around less than 1% of the students inside the institute actually do a startup. So our main vision is that we empower or evangelize entrepreneurship, and we want to make everyone within the institute entrepreneurial in all the activities which they do. So how do we do that? So the first thing which we do is we promote entrepreneurship. So what I mean by promoting is, so I guess everyone who has joined here, so some of them might know about entrepreneurship or some of them are new to entrepreneurship. So the people who are new to entrepreneurship, we try to simplify the term entrepreneurship and all the jargons which are involved in that, and we try to present it in the most fun way possible so that you guys can also learn about entrepreneurship and we can ignite the spirit of entrepreneurship among you. Other thing which we do is we nurture entrepreneurship, or if I put in the very layman terms, we nurture ideas. So this is the most important thing which we consider, because the journey from idea to startup is the difficult and the crucial one. So we help by giving you one-to-one mentorship, and We do many master classes and workshops. We connect you to the relevant mentors out there so that you can get more and more clarity over your things, and you can convert your idea to a startup. And as I mentioned, so there are many startups inside the institute. So we also support the startups inside the institute by providing them mentorships and by providing them, helping them to build their team, helping them to get interns. Also, ESL team work with some of the startups for around 1 to 2 months so that we can help them, say, in defining their strategies or defining their some part of their business plan. So yeah, this is something overall about eCell. So, like eCell started in the year 1998 with the name C-Types, and in 2015 we renamed C-Types to eCell. So we have been continuing this thing from since a long time, and there are many of the resources which we have. So, a startup or idea at whatever stage, if you guys approach eCell, so we will be able to help you in whatever way possible. So in this way, like we have a lot of activities planned for all of the research scholars and all of the students of the institute. So our main aim behind this is we want to convert the ideas which are germinating within the lab, as the session is all about, as Deepak mentioned, lab to market. So we want to take that ideas from the lab and how we can present, how we can uh, make it possible so that we can penetrate into the market. So the activities which we do, I'll just go through some of them. So the keynotes, the lecture series which we conduct with some of the renowned personalities and also the professors, and also some from incubation cell and all the others entrepreneurship body inside the institute. We try to conduct some keynote lectures so that it make easier for all of you to understand the bodies inside the institute. Coming to GTIF, so this is one of our most uh, like one of the most interactive event which we started last year, which is getting to know institute founder. The founders, your seniors who have started the startup, will be interacting to you on the face to, like you will be having face to face interaction with them. We will also have some of the club activities, like some of the games, some of the marketing games, some of the business simulation games, so that you guys can understand some of the jargon or some of the very hard thing in a very simple way. We also help you to make your team. So if you are starting up, you are alone, you are finding difficulty to found your co-founder, or you are to find some members in your team. It can be from UG, it can be from PG, anywhere. We help you to build your team. uh, some of them who don't have idea, but if you want to develop your entrepreneurial thinking, we conduct case study competition. Startup series is one of the recent, the ongoing, I would say, the ongoing event which is going on, and I'm proud to say that out of the 12 startups which we selected from the 30, 4 to 5 startups are from research scholars and PhD. So this is a kind of 45-day long program where we take idea to a startup. Coming to startup services program, so startup services program is like where ESL team, 7 to 8 members from the ESL team will be working with you for a span of 1 to 2 months. We will be defining your market strategy, or we will be helping you to uh, take user interviews to do your idea validation. And last but not the least, e-summit. So every year we celebrate the entrepreneurial ecosystem of the institute through a 2 to 3 day festival which we do every even semester. We will be doing it in the upcoming semester, that is e-summit. And there are a lot and lot of activities which will be planned. And yeah, you stay tuned. We will be releasing the activities of e-summit soon. So yeah, this is overall about e-cell and what all the activities which we have in mind for you guys. If still there are any doubts, you guys can contact us. You guys can mail, or you guys can contact CDC-R, and we will be in touch with you. You guys can visit our website and subscribe to our social media handle. Thank you very much, and I will pass to Deepak.
Yeah. Um, Thanks a lot, Akshit. That was very detailed. Next, we have Mr. Ashwath, who is head at Nirmaan team. I request Mr. Ashwath to address everyone on behalf of Nirmaan.
Hi,
Over to you, Ashwath.
am I audible?
Yes, Ashwath, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm trying to share my screen. Is it visible?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
All right. Cool. So, Hello, good evening all. I'm Ashwath. I'm heading the organizing team of Nirmaan. And in that capacity, I've been called here today to give a brief introduction to Nirmaan. So this is a gist of what Nirmaan is. So for those of you who don't know, Nirmaan is a pre-incubation cell of IIT Madras. And it is taken as the only on-campus pre-incubation cell in India, at least of this magnitude. So we have a specific focus towards the students of IIT Madras, keeping in mind their constraints and helping them take their ideas into, sorry, help them take them from the ideas to a startup. So of course, so hi, really sorry. Caller, 1 minute. Really sorry about that. Yeah. So of course, not all the teams who approach us become startups, but many drop along the way, find out they have been working on a wrong statement, etc. But that is fine with us. So essentially, as a pre-incubation cell, what we are driven towards is to deliver the experience of entrepreneurship to the students of IIT Madras. So this has been started in 2015, and since then we have addressed definitely over 100 teams, and we have over 50 teams incubated under us, of which over 12 teams have graduated. So what's in it for you? You get to work in a risk-free environment. We provide you financial assistance. We also provide various opportunities, including networking. We also Hello. Hello. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, my internet has been a bit off today. All right. Uh, so, uh, what Nirmaan is essentially a program structured for you guys, and we provide a risk-free environment along with financial assistance. So we provide a seed funding of up to 2 lakhs to help you guys uh, provide make things including MVPs, including marketing and various other forms. We also provide a workspace which is primarily of a corporate firm, and we also have a pool of about 20 mentors who are mostly alumni who help you guide you on various business aspects of your startup. So I should have probably started off with this page. And throughout the year, we also have various workshops and events for our incubated startups, teaching various concepts, and at the same time have collaborations such as recently we had our GDC Inspire cohort, which where about 5 teams underwent a 4 to 5 week long customer discovery program where they talked to over 40 teams. What we look for in teams is a demonstration of intent, uh, participation. They should be reciprocative to our efforts. We also expect some amount of seriousness. So as a pre-incubation cell, we are quite understanding as far as the academic and research constraints which many of the PhD scholars have. But apart from that, we expect the startup to be the primary focus of the individual. So we have a bunch of collaborators. So our primary collaborator definitely is the IITM Incubation Cell, which has hosted, which hosts multiple ex-Nirmaan startups. We also have an educational, more of a scholastic tie-up with TIE, who invite us for various programs of theirs and provide us with different assistance. And coming to in the news, startups and Nirmaan has been featured in the news on multiple occasions. So this, in fact, recently one of our startups was featured. So we have a team called Modulus Housing, which built portable hospital units in Wayanad. And that's about it. So if you have any particular queries for us, you can reach out to me at nirmaan@smail.iitm.ac.in or ping me at to my mobile number. I'll ensure the PPT is shared with you, and I'll urge all of you to go through the student guidebook which we recently made for everyone, where we have briefed on the journey in. We have covered most of the topics which one might ask as far as Nirmaan is concerned, right from application to when a startup is ready for graduation, questions on finances, questions on patenting, and various other possible questions. Yeah. So that's about it. I'm open to all questions.
Thanks a lot, Ashwit. We'll have a Q&A later.
Yeah.
So I see. Next we have Jaya ma'am from Incubation Cell. I'd like to request Mr. Jaya ma'am to represent IC on. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Deepak. Good evening, everyone. Nice to virtually meet all of you. I believe this is the second or the third year that there is such a structured approach to kind of, enable an engagement from the different entrepreneurship initiatives with the research scholars. So it's very heartening to see that this is kind of a continuing process. I know that I have very limited time. So what I'm going to do is just share 2 slides. Let me just see how best I can do that. Yeah. Is the slide visible, Deepak?
Yes, ma'am. We could see that.
Okay, fantastic. So, like I said, I'm just going to share 2 slides, and there's a definite purpose behind why I'm sharing this. One, like everyone said, IIT Madras Incubation Cell is definitely like the nodal incubator of IIT Madras. But we also have additional 3 incubators. So IIT Madras actually has 4 incubators, the incubation cell, which is kind of the umbrella body. We have the rural technology business incubator, which looks at rural and social startups, the bio incubator, and the medtech incubator. Like the name suggests, they look at the biotech and the medtech startups respectively. The incubation cell itself is sector agnostic, and we support any startup who's developing an innovative product. We pride ourselves on being the country's leading deep tech startup hub. And what do we mean by that? To date, all the 4 incubators put together, we have incubated close to 200, just crossed 200 startups. And 95 to 97% of these are deep tech startups. What I mean by deep tech is that they have a core engineering innovation at the heart of whatever product or solution that they are trying to offer. And even if you look at the quote unquote software companies, are primarily, AI, ML, big data, data analytics, and so on, with some AR, VR companies as well. We are very proud of, the kind of startups that we have incubated. And where do primarily all these startups come in for? Like I said, there is a reason why I'm kind of showing the snapshot. The IIT incubators are not limited only to the IIT Madras community, but to the larger IIT community, and of course to all external as well. And while we do have a large percentage, about 40% coming in from outside, we do have IIT alumni. You'll see that there is a fairly large, percentage from the IITM faculty with their project staff and the students. And students, we include the PhD scholars as well. So we are seeing an increasing trend of faculty with their research scholars who are kind of trying to see whether the cutting edge research that they're doing in the lab can now be taken to market. And I know that there are quite a few of these initiatives. We work very closely with some of them, e-cell and Nirmaan, like rightly said, we do work. And so some of the preliminary hand-holding can definitely happen there. But in addition, what is the kind of support that we can offer if you do decide to, have a startup? I'm just going to go to the next slide. So what are the kind of, support that we provide? I will come to the mentorship a little later. So if you're incubated, then we do offer you office space to start with. All the incubator offices are located in the IIT Madras Research Park, which is an independent campus right next to the IIT Madras campus. If you've not had a chance to visit it, as and when things improve and you're all back in campus and there is a sense of normalcy, please do come visit us and interact with some of our startups. So when you get incubated, we offer you small office space, and as the team grows, we also offer you space on the different floors at subsidized rate. We offer you basic business support services because most of you, when you come in, have just minimal knowledge of the, accounting or CS or legal. So we are happy to offer you these support services. We conduct very regular training talks on core entrepreneurship themes, starting from, say, a business model canvas to how to design a business plan, going on to, how to pitch, also to market, say a B2C marketing, B2B marketing. When is the right time to, go to investors? So we kind of offer all these talks followed by very intensive handheld workshops. We do a lot of investor connects, help with hiring, and a lot of networking events as well. We do provide a small amount of seed funding. The getting incubated alone is no guarantee that you will get seed funding. You have to come to us with a funding proposal, but yes, anywhere from about 5 to 10 lakhs to 25-30 lakhs, we do kind of look at funding proposals. But what has been most valued by our startups has been, of course, the mentorship. And some of the alumni, pool is common to, many of the campus initiatives as well. And we are very fortunate to kind of leverage the IIT alumni network for that. But we also have a lot of industry heads, again, where we leverage the IIT Madras industry network, who come in very regularly. And they come in here just because they believe in the ecosystem and not because they get compensated. Okay, there is no monetary compensation involved here. Plus, of course, we leverage the IIT Madras faculty's strength for technology support. And when the stage is right, we also connect our startup to the investor network. So if you're at a stage where you believe you're looking at commercializing the technology that you're building in the lab, I would request that you ask yourself 3 important questions. 1, are you sure that the technology is now at a stage where you believe it is ready to be commercialized? Is it still going to need a lot of funding? Is it going to need a lot of expensive equipment? Is it going to need a lot of lab space? If that is the case, then perhaps it still needs to be in the lab for some more time. If you believe it has crossed all of this and with just a little bit of support on all of these fronts, you can really commercialize it, then I would say yes, then you can kind of start seriously looking at it. Secondly, a startup is not the only way to commercialize. Perhaps there are other ways. You could look at licensing, you could look at, doing to some industry and seeing if there is interest. And I'm sure your faculty is there to kind of help you in kind of assessing, what is the right way to kind of take your technology forward. Finally, I would say that a startup is definitely, like Deepak said, it's a beautiful journey, but it can be a lonely journey. And this has to be something which requires your 100% effort, and you will need someone to drive the business end of it. So if you believe you're going to be the one who's going to go talk to the clients, go talk to the customers, handle the business end of it, that is great. Otherwise, you will need a co-founder who will kind of work with you on this. So I would suggest this, give all these 3 aspects some thought, and we are happy to have a conversation at any stage. You can please, just Google us, speak to the e-cell members. We work closely with them. I know Akshay. So Deepak has my contact. Speak to them, get our contacts. You're welcome to write to us and kind of have a conversation. Our mentors are more than happy to kind of, have those initial conversations where you're still kind of trying to understand what is the right stage that you wish to have a startup. So we are okay to kind of have a conversation with you at any stage and kind of help you with this. And I would recommend that you kind of, go through the kind of journeys that our startups have, and we are there to support you once you kind of take that decision. So good luck to everyone, and thank you so much, eCell, for having me here.
Thanks a lot, ma'am. That was more descriptive. Now we'll have a small Q&A session. People are free to ask the queries to any representatives those who are here. You can either unmute your mic and ask your questions, or you can either put it in the chat box. We wait for a couple of minutes. Is there any question would you like to ask, guys? Okay, I see there are no questions. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Mr. Akshit, Mr. Ashwath, and Jaya Madam, and also Mr. Sanket for joining us today. Thanks a lot once again. Now moving forward, we have our today's speaker, Professor Satyanarayanan Chakravarthy, who is an aerospace engineering professor at IIT Madras. He is also the co-founder of ePlanes.ai, Aerostrovilos Energy Private Limited, Agnikul Cosmos, and also he's a founder at National Center for Combustion R&D. So he is passionate about deep tech entrepreneurship to democratize technology and foster sustainable development. We are glad to have you here, sir. Over to you.
Thank you, Deepak. Glad to be here. I'm actually pretty happy to be talking at e-cell. I think e-cell is doing a phenomenal job on campus. Therefore, this is probably the first call that I should be making on the message that I want to spread, and I'm extremely glad and thankful for being asked to do so here in this meeting. Thank you very much once again. Let me share my screen and get going with my talk. Is my screen visible?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Yes. We're talking about this title that I have coined. In fact, it's a word that I coined called defrastructure. Just to give a sense of the meaning of the talk, I think Shaswati Kannan, when she wrote to me, she essentially got a sense that this is all about democratizing technology using deep tech entrepreneurship. So let's just pause a bit and then ask this question about this talk. There is a meaning that I'm trying to convey on democratizing technology, the whatever is called defrastructure and so on. But I want to be very honest with you. The core purpose of this talk is to actually enthuse the listeners to what we call as deep tech entrepreneurship. That's exactly what I'm wanting to pitch. And when I say deep tech entrepreneurship, I do mean tech that is coming out of research in, let's say, IIT Madras labs or any such universities, fairly premier institutions and so on. So I will show you examples of how the research that we do gets translated into technology and entrepreneurship and so on. And I would like to emphasize the entrepreneurship journey, which is important because doing research does not translate to technology. The technology does not translate to product. Product does not translate to business. So all these are quite different from each other. And until we actually understand all these things, it will be difficult for us to embark on entrepreneurship. Having done all these things, I'm trying to put all this together in this talk and coming up with a synthesis of an idea called defrastructure or democratizing technology. This has happened over time in our combustion center. So it is sort of like a derivative, but that is the one that actually is sort of standing out as a common element across all of these things. So bear with me while I'm actually going through the idea of the defrastructure, democratizing technology. Before I get to the deep tech entrepreneurship, I'll probably try to get there as fast as I can. So in my opinion, I mean, for what we are doing at NCCRD, what I am passionate about, these ideas of democratizing technology, defrastructure is quite important because we think that it will be impactful, but it doesn't have to be something that you have to pursue as a person passionate about deep tech entrepreneurship itself, right? So I just wanted to give a preface of where this talk is going. Good. Having a little problem with moving slides. Are you able to listen to me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I think I'm getting there. Good. So, so one of the things that you will understand is, India is still a developing country. It's probably going to be a developing country for quite some time. I don't know who is doing that. And we keep hearing that the governments have to spend money on infrastructure in order for India to develop. You see how China has done this. China has these massive highways, high-speed trains, a lot of infrastructure that they have developed, putting money into it, and so on. And they are at a fast pace in development, and so we are always challenged on doing this, right? So, what is actually meant by modern structure? So you have a lot of things. Like, for example, I talked about high-speed trains, fiber optic networks, refineries, telephone lines, highways, fighter aircraft, water pipelines, power stations, drainage lines, airports, ICBMs, fighter aircraft. I think I mentioned that. So city gas lines, crude or gas pipelines, sewage lines, solar farms. You see, so many of them have to actually happen for us to be able to live in a modern world, right? And you have to actually really ask yourself, as a single individual, are you really worth all of these things, right? An American will say yes, but I think as an Indian, we'll probably be more humble. We have to ask the question, and then there is also a question of sustainability of the planet that goes along with all of this, right? So this is the fundamental crux that we want to try to attack. So this actually puts a gun on our head, because if you sign up for the development agenda on the terms set by the developed world, you are actually a loser right away, right? You're a follower. You're never going to be a leader. You will never be able to catch up, because they are setting the terms of the agenda of development. Now, it is not to say that we want to actually be poor. We want to be very simple. We want to be sort of Gandhian. I mean, some elements of Gandhianness is actually here. I'll explain that. We want to have all the comforts. We want to have the development. We want to have the standard of living. We want to have the quality of life. All of that stuff, no compromise. But is there a way to do it in a different way than what the developed world has done? And China has actually copied in a brute force manner. Can we actually be smarter in doing this? That's the question, right? So the way out essentially is to turn the question on its head. And what is the question that we are actually trying to turn on its head? Right? Do we need massive infrastructure in the first place for the development that we talk about? Right? Is there can we look at a alternative model of development? So what is that alternative model of development? We are a technology institution, so we have to start looking at technological ways by which we will be able to approach this. And is there a way by which we can make new and smaller but smarter tech, right? Maybe it's probably very high tech, because we are trying to shrink things. We want to try to make it smaller, and we have to make it smarter. So it's probably pretty high tech. And who best can do this than somebody at IIT Madras, for example, right? So why would I want to actually make it smaller? Is because I want to have much less capital investment. This is the basic problem, right? So if I have to construct a highway that connects to cities, that's a lot of capital investment. But is there an alternative to actually not having those highways at all and do something better than that? You want to make a product that will replace the requirement for highways, but that has to be done at a much smaller capital investment. If the capital investment required for the alternative is more than the existing approach, there is really no point, right? So that's the reason why we want to make it smaller. And if you make it smaller, you can actually make it distributed. You can kind of grow the infrastructure in a modular manner. It can allow for local decision making instead of a brute force decision making being made from Delhi or any of the state capitals. You can actually go down to the district level or the panchayat level for making decisions. It can also actually allow for people to participate in the cleanup. A quick example that I always give is, if somebody basically said, I'm not going to put any thermal power plants and big thermal power plants that are generating hundreds of megawatts of power and spewing a lot of smoke, and then that power is transmitted across like hundreds of miles, kilometers distance to reach where you are. Instead, it's up to you to actually generate your own power in your backyard. Will you? And then let's say somebody came up with the technology of a backyard thermal power plant that spews that much amount of smoke that's required to produce the power. Will you go for it, or will you go for a rooftop solar, which is cleaner for you, right? So you will be able to actually make a decision on what is clean tech for you. And right now that is not possible because somebody else has made a decision that they will actually put up thermal power plant, right? So a local decision making and a modular approach will allow for the local people to make decisions on a sustainable technology to be adopted, right? And in some ways, this will also mean that we can go back to our roots in terms of, India has lived for like about thousands of years, and it's been a developed country for a very long time. So we probably knew how to live a great life before, right? So is it possible for us to actually start thinking about how people did this for like thousands of years until recently? So now, so when I now say something is small, and I'm talking about again, I think Gandhi is showing up here. There is a beautiful book that I had read when I was growing up as a undergraduate student. It was, in fact, the first time I read this book was as part of a humanities course in my bachelor's. So there is this book called "Small is Beautiful" by E. Schumacher, right? Who advocates small technology for developing countries, right? So distributed small work centers for developing countries. This is sort of like a Gandhian principle. Now, in the last century, right, when I grew up, advanced countries were actually getting entrenched in large technical. So all this big array of all this big power lines, pipelines, airplanes, airports, all of that stuff is all a product of the 20th century having been developed in advanced countries. So at that time, that's what they were doing. So in contrast to that, the small workplaces had to be considered to be technologically inferior. But today, that cannot sell. We can't actually have a technologically inferior approach at all. We are now raring to go. We want to now become a developed country and so on. So we are still talking about small products that we can do. Obviously, they have to be technologically superior in order to overcome these very large systems, right? So we are talking about something that is actually technologically superior when compared to what exists today that is derived out of the advanced countries from the previous century. This is the paradigm shift that we are talking about. There is another very interesting book that that I came across a few years back, and I would advise everybody to go through this. This could be a game changer. So, in fact, this book was written in the late 90s by Clayton Christensen. I think in many ways, this is the one that introduced the term disruptive technology. What is meant by disruptive? So it looked like it's actually inferior to start with, and it tries to get into a new market when compared to the existing market and supplying existing customers. But over time, it actually grows and replaces the existing technology, right? So there is a sustaining technology that progress that can actually become par with the mainstream markets, as we say. So every technology will grow at a certain pace, and it will overcome the requirement of the market at some point and actually replace the existing technology. So this disruption is actually a very, very important aspect that we have to talk about. So what is what gives, as they say, right? So we want to first of all question the assumption that massive infrastructure is. We disrupt with new, smarter, small scale, deep, high tech that obviates then is need for a massive infrastructure. In fact, it would even necessitate that we need to dismantle the existing infrastructure simply because it will be difficult for us to even maintain this massive infrastructure that already we have. And I've seen this with my own eyes. Tamil Nadu is actually in a very well developed state. So they have very good infrastructure in terms of electrification. If you go tell them you don't need all this infrastructure, we will actually have a much better way of distributing smaller tech. They would say, then we have actually invested in all this infrastructure. What are we going to do with it, right? Well, if you continue to do this, you will probably have to spend a lot of money trying to maintain that, right? So at some point, you will have to listen to what we are trying to say here. Ongoing, smaller and more distributed, which will be much more, much less maintenance intensive as much when compared to the massive infrastructure that they have developed, right? So that is exactly what we want to call as defrastructure. So, now what is defrastructure? We will actually give a couple of examples. I grew up at a time when we didn't have phones in India. Like my home did not have a phone, and if I have to actually make a phone call, I have to probably go to a shop and give a rupee or use public phones, or go to a friend's home, or if I have to receive a call, I have to have a friend call me and then I go there, blah blah blah. Very few phone lines, right? Now this completely got disrupted the moment we actually got mobile phones. And the reason is there was this last mile copper cable that had to be laid all the way up to my home. That was very infrastructure intensive. But the moment you actually have a phone in your hand, which doesn't require the wire connection, you're completely disrupting that space, and you are bringing a part of the bargain to the table, because previously the phone instrument also had to be provided by the government along with the copper wire and all of that stuff, right? Instead, you say, well, I'll actually get my instrument, and I can get as fancy an instrument as I can afford, 60,000 rupees, whatever it is, right? And then do whatever I want with it, and so on. And there are these what do you call user the service providers who will actually simply provide the service in a wireless manner, right? So if you now say I'm willing to go halfway in the bargain, then it's possible to actually have the rest of the world come halfway to meet your requirements. So this is one key element of infrastructure. One of the things that's already happening now as we speak is the disruption in the vehicles. So if you now look at a combustion vehicle, and this is very ironical that I am talking about this coming from the National Center for Combustion R&D. If you now look at a combustion vehicle when compared to an electric vehicle, there is a 2,000 plus moving parts when compared to about 18 moving parts over here. The part count drastically decreases when you now try to have an electric vehicle. So as we speak, in the next 5 years, 3 to 5 years, you will find electric vehicles becoming cheaper than combustion vehicles, and you will find that automobile companies will stop making combustion vehicles, and they will switch to electric vehicles, and ownership will also switch from combustion vehicles to electric vehicles, and suddenly you will find that mobility becomes a lot more affordable when compared to what it used to be. So people used to have their own cars or so, but in India, of course, we used to have auto rickshaws. The idea of auto rickshaws is now becoming like Uber, Ola, including using auto rickshaws, right? So ownership will actually be gone. In fact, I think I have that slide. So, the next level of this thing, what do you call, defrastructure is essentially to have aggregation of transportation as opposed to ownership. So the moment you actually have no ownership, you don't need parking lots, and parking lots are an infrastructure item. So today, if you want to actually take a car and go to let's say T Nagar and then do shopping, that's the most idiotic thing to do, right? Nobody would want to do that, because where would you park your car? Correct. So and this is actually a pressure on a developing country. Whereas if you now ask the question to a developed world, you are the idiots who actually came up with the idea of having to have parking lots. That's a stupid thing, right? So just kind of challenge the developed world, saying this is what you have been doing is stupid, right? We have to do it the right way, right? So this is the kind of shift that we are beginning to see already. Now, the problem that we are seeing is all these things, and of course there is rooftop solar, I mentioned, that's also happening, right? Now, all these things are happening in what we call as the circuit branches, right? That is the computer science, electronics, electrical, all of those, information, communication, and electrical technology. Now, a lot of other things are all involving mechanical engineering part. What about engines? What about trains? What about planes? What about rockets, right? So there are lots of things that have to be done. How do you get your energy? How do you get your power, right? So a lot of these things have to be done in a way that's completely different than what's been happening, right? So that's exactly where, in fact, this is, ideally speaking, I should have actually started my talk here, and all of that stuff is a preface. So let's say you might excuse me for that. let's actually start with this, and then I'll come back to how we are trying to do what I said. Right. So at the National Center for Combustion R&D, we have been doing a lot of combustion research, and as well as my own personal research in electric planes that gets translated into startups. So we have 4 or 5 startups. In fact, I think I've not mentioned one of them here. So the ePlane company is where we have been making things like drones and hybrid planes, and ultimately we are expecting to make in the next couple of years air taxis for intra-city commute. Basically, the Uber and Ola will become like flying vehicles instead of on the road vehicles. Agnikul is a mini rocket launch vehicle. Micro gas turbine. Aerostrovilos is a micro gas turbine company for local power generation. And Extra Fuels is something that's generating crude oil from waste. And of course, we have been ideating the Avishkar Hyperloop work out of NCCRD, where a couple of us, me and Muruganandam, are the mentors for the students. So let's just go through each of these. And this was the purpose of the talk, which is to showcase how research can lead to product development. So what we are trying to do here is to develop micro gas turbines. Gas turbines, for people who don't know, are essentially the kind of engines that power aircraft. So if the next time you sit in a plane and you get a seat near the wing, window seat near the wing, and look out the window and you see a wing, that will be a big engine that is slung under the wing. That's a gas turbine engine, more or less. I mean, I think most planes essentially are run by gas turbines today. So what we are trying to do is to see if I can have a miniaturized version of that that can produce anywhere between about 20 to 100 kilowatts. And the next thing that we want to do with that is try to use any fuel to burn it, right? So we have this engine that we want to do where the footprint is very, very small when compared to, let's say, a diesel genset that occupies like a room. You will see that parked outside our library and in many of those places. What you will find is this can actually sit on a tabletop. It's like about a 1 meter cube kind of. So it's extremely compact, incredibly fuel flexible. I'll talk about that in the next slide, right? And extremely clean in terms of pollutant emissions. If you look at the table at the bottom, you'll find that the allowable and the expected norms are whatever they are, and we are actually about a 10th or 100th of those numbers in terms of NOx, unburned hydrocarbon, and carbon monoxide emissions and all of that stuff, right? And we want to actually pitch the cost as comparable to diesel gensets. And by virtue of being a continuous combustion device, it has much reduced maintenance. These are the ones that are allowing for it to be a defrastructure item, right? And as I mentioned, it's actually extremely compact, right? So what exactly is causing this to happen is the patents that we have filed on what's called a swirl mesh lean direct injection combustion. So when the NCCRD started, one of the mandates of NCCRD was to attack grand challenges of practical importance in combustion. And we tried to do that with a swirl mesh lean direct injection. And when we tried to push this to the industry, what we found was that the industry was actually making large engines. And when they're making large engines, their investments are very large. Their outlook for realizing that hardware and putting it into the market is very long. So all these things are extremely complicated. So what we said that we want to actually try to minimize all of that stuff, and the only way we can do this to make small engines, and that has to be done with startups instead of having to go back to big companies. And but the startups have to have a business case. And that means that the small engines should actually be economically viable, and they should be able to do a revenue generation pretty quickly, and so on. So a lot of entrepreneurship had to be learned in order to be able to push the research and technology that we were developing at the Combustion Center into a startup for making a product, right? So the technological advancement that was obtained out of this was the high turn down ratios, flat what's called as spark load efficiencies. That means we can actually burn at 20% of the original max fuel consumption and still hold flames and without any instabilities. There is geometric novelty that is enabled by metal 3D printing. So this is one technological advancement that has actually happened, which we want to capitalize on. So metal 3D printing is something that's becoming ubiquitous today, and what all can you do with it is something that you have to start thinking about in order to commercialize products, right? So it essentially allows for a level playing field. When compared to a GE Siemens kind of thing, if I'm able to make a small product which is now easily 3D printable, I'm getting rid of a lot of precision part manufacturing and precision assembly requirements that are extremely time consuming and costly, which big companies are able to afford. Instead, for the same amount of precision, or even better, right, I can actually get that done with a metal 3D printer, right? So what is possible with doing this? The moment I actually have a distributed power generation system with locally available fuels, it's extremely fuel tolerant because of the continuous combustion of the lean direct injection that we're talking about. So I said the first thing that I talked about is incredibly fuel flexible. That means I can produce locally available fuels like biogas or from biomasses and all of that stuff, in addition to petrol, diesel, and all of that. I'll come to that. So the moment I can do that, I can put this along with solar, wind, and try to have it as a backup. And this is a cheaper option than actually having grid level kind of storage. It's still not possible. So we can kick this in during night times, or whether it's like low wind or low sun and so on, and be part of a matrix of possibilities. The moment we do this, we can simply say goodbye to all this large thermal power generation plants and this long distance transmission. You just locally produce and locally consume. So you don't need to actually go through all this huge paraphernalia of and see that suddenly makes it like a huge change in the way we have to think about it, right? So because we are actually fuel flexible, we can actually afford a price point that could be competitive with electric, right? Because a truck driver can actually choose whether he wants to go electric or he wants to. So we can have these hybrid varieties where you allow the user to choose. That's what the democratizing technology is all about. Whether he wants to recharge his battery pack, or he wants in a recharging station, or he wants to actually have an onboard generator which he is fueling with a fuel that is locally available, like biogas or whatever it is, that is even cheaper than the electricity, right? So all of these options now become possible with a engine that, like this, for example, right? Now the extra fuels is actually pretty mind-boggling to me. Now, is it possible for us to hit two birds in one stone? One is it possible for me to utilize all the waste that is available? And second, is it possible to produce something value added from there? And that's where the extra fuels idea is to use unsegregated municipal solid waste coming out of cities in order to produce biocrude, right? So now again, this idea of unsegregated municipal solid waste and the idea of using, okay, I'll come back to do one thing at a time. The idea of unsegregated municipal solid waste is again a defrastructure. I mean, if you are very smart, you will come up with, and note this, I will actually repeat this again for the engines a little later, right? If you are really smart, you will come up with a way to treat waste that is not segregated and not ask the citizens to segregate. Okay, so engineering is all about making people lazy. Let's just understand this. We are supposed to make machines that will make people lazy. If you ask people to segregate, that means that's additional infrastructure. You have to carry this segregated waste everywhere and all that stuff, and you are actually making people work and so on. I mean, it's one thing to get them to be conscious of the society, this thing, but you're not smart. You are actually trying to pass on your lack of smartness as a people's responsibility. If you are smart, you should say, well, I can actually handle unsegregated waste and work with it. Well, if the people want to segregate, well, let them segregate. If they want, I'll actually go mix them back and then do it. That's exactly what we do in our center. Because on campus, we actually get a very beautiful segregated waste, and we mix them back together in different proportions to create waste of different kinds in order to check out how our technology works. Because we want to make sure we defrastructurize waste segregation. What do? So the heart of this is what is called as a hydrothermal liquefaction unit. And this tries to mimic nature's way of producing fossil fuels underground over millions of years, but we try to accelerate it over about a half an hour to 1 hour time frame by going up to high pressures and high temperatures. So essentially take water along with the feedstock. In fact, if my feedstock were moist, it's actually very beautiful because I need that moisture. I will add water, and this water doesn't have to be pure water. It can be dirty water, right? A bathroom drainage water is fine. I will put all of that stuff, heat it up, and the heating cost is actually much less when compared to the value that I'm going to get out of it, right? In terms of the calorific value of the crude and the biochar that I will get. So that's not a big problem. And I cook this feedstock for about half an hour or 1 hour, and I will actually get crude. Now, question is, and then we have tried this with, as I said, unsegregated municipal solid waste, sugarcane, bagasse, algae, rice straw, all of those kinds of things, right? And then we get crude and biochar with heating values that are comparable to commercially available crude and commercially available char, right? Now, there is like, the X crude can simply do a lot of things other than just produce the crude. So you can see a lot of processes like upgradation of feedstock, lubricants. So all the petroleum things that can be done can actually be done with this crude, and the biochar also can be used for a lot of applications. So in one stroke, what we simply say, I don't want to import oil. Everybody is producing waste, right? That's pretty good, right? So all of our waste can actually be made to oil. That means like I will import, well, you know, it looks like a very fancy thing, but as we grow, we can basically say we can import less and less oil, right? So we don't need those oil tankers. We don't need those long pipelines from Caspian Sea all the way up through Afghanistan and all that stuff, right? And much more interestingly and importantly, because I have a fuel agnostic engine from the Aerostrovilos, right? What I basically say is I don't need refineries too, because it's actually stupid for about 100 years for engineers to have been making engines that have to precisely take diesel or kerosene or you know, a petrol and all those things. These are like so finely fractionally distilled into, you know, carbon chain of 8 carbons or 10 carbon or 12 carbons and all that stuff. I mean, if you are really a smart engineer, you will actually come up with an engine that will take any fuel, right? And that's exactly what we want to do. So which essentially means that if I got my crude, all I have to do is to distill the crude to make sure that I remove the sludge, because crude will actually have particulates. And I'll remove the sludge and I get a clear oil. This oil will have all components. It will have C8, it will have C10, it will have C12, all of that. It's some oil. We don't know what to call that oil. Right now we are calling it X crude, right? This oil is something that we can actually put into an engine that will produce power. So immediately we see we don't need all of these things. Locally we will produce fuel from waste, and locally we will consume to produce the power that we want. Everything can be done locally. We don't need all these massive infrastructure. So what we have talked about today is so far energy. Let's actually talk about transportation. In the transportation sector, we have the ePlane company that's coming out of my research that I decided to start doing on electric planes, where we started doing what's called ACONS, which is a 2 to 6 kg payload for delivery applications. We are going through the regulatory processes for this to be enabled over the next few years, so that you will have drones come and deliver your Swiggy or Zomato or whatever Dunzo products, right? And so on. But these are specifically meant for long distance flights. That means we are not talking about these normal drones that you use for photography applications or a bigger variety. It's actually technologically superior with wings and the drone rotors. So this is actually going over like about 800 kilometers and so on. So this can now disrupt the delivery ecosystem completely, and it will make it cheaper for deliveries, right? So the next thing, of course, we will want to do, and this is something that we have done. We are moving on to the next thing, which is to make about, let's say, 40 to 50 kg payloads for goods transportation. Again, to disrupt that, we have shown cases where, for example, if you transport blood packets from city hospitals, district hospitals to taluk hospitals, it is cheaper, and you have a better access to blood samples more immediately than if you were to use the current way of distributing them through diesel vans and so on. Now, the last one is, of course, to make a 200 kg payload variety where you will be able to have two people sit and go across. Now, the moment you actually do this, Bangaloreans will stop complaining about the potholes on the road, because they're not going to use the road, right? So, I mean, again, it looks like a paradise, but we will grow, right? So, in fact, for every 100 Ola or Uber road taxis, it's sufficient to actually have something like 10 of these ePlanes, because the trip distances will actually come down from the trip times will come down from anywhere between 1 or 1.5 hours to about 5 to 10 minutes. That means like a single ePlane trip can actually do multiple such trips, right? So you don't need as many planes as road taxis in the first place, and they are not on the road, and they are not occupying the road, they are not congesting the road, and then they are not going through the potholes on the road. The government, the municipality does not have to lay the roads again and again. So all they are doing is to actually take off from one point and land at another point, right? So you see that suddenly actually bringing down the infrastructure required. Even the drones, right? So this is actually the first step, the thing that we did. So these are actually, as I said, a new tech that we have developed, which is a combination of fixed wing and rotorcraft. So they work both ways. And of course, in the corner, we have a picture of what we call as an agricopter. So this is actually for spraying pesticides on agriculture. So why is that an interesting thing? So if you use things like, these kinds of birds, look at how it is actually being done in the US. They use a manned aircraft and dump a lot of pesticide. And pesticides actually occupy a huge amount of money that the farmer has to incur in the product, in the produce, right? And it also is actually extremely hazardous to do manual spraying. So in the US, they have these large farms. Here we have very small farms. We can't do these aircraft kind of approaches. We have to have correspondingly smaller aircraft. So again, make it smaller planes, just do the right kind of spraying that is required in very, very low volumes, so that you can save a lot of money and bring down the amount of pesticide that's being used. So it allows you to go more organic and so on. Right? So similarly, this can be used for transporting organs that are used for organ transplant. Many times we have seen like these green corridors that are being set up for movement of these organs from, let's say, an airport to a hospital or something, stopping all the vehicles on the road. All of that is unnecessary infrastructure. Instead, I mean, everybody should be doing whatever they are doing, and nobody should even know that an organ is actually getting transported, right? So while there, is it possible for us to actually use this as a weapon? I mean, while we're saving lives, is it also possible to kill lives? Of course, enemies' lives, hopefully, right? And you saw what happened with those surgical strikes, right? So you have a manned, huge fighter aircraft that is imported, and then a Indian Air Force officer sits, a pilot sits, and then goes and drops a bomb, and then or whatever he does, and then he gets lost, and then he gets recovered. Blah blah. Lots of drama. Well, the same thing actually can be done by about 50 or 100 of these simultaneously striking a place. So all of a sudden, I don't need fighter aircrafts anymore. I don't need to import any of these things, and these things can be made in large numbers with very small money. And you now have many large number of them actually trying to strike at one particular place. We can coordinate them to do this. And similarly, for the same reason, we don't need all these big ICBMs anymore. We can try to do these kinds of strikes. Talking about air taxis, we can clearly show that this will be much less. I mean, we can offer like Uber level prices with air taxis over time, which essentially means that for about 10x reduction in the travel time, you are paying pretty much the same price, or about 1.5x. Right? This is what we call as a micro or even a nano aviation. And the next level would be, is it possible for me to actually go to my suburbs or my satellite towns by air? Right? And is it possible to have like local airports over metro stations, metro station rooftops, and so on, where planes can take off and go, right? And if you don't have space in, let's say, for example, you want to actually go to a satellite township, you don't need an airport for you to land. If you don't have an airport, or you don't have a metro station there, you don't have metro there, take a playground, put a circular runway, and then you should be able to get a small airport. So why do you have to have these huge airports and with all these malls kind of thing and so on, right? That's not required. So the urban aerial mobility is now emerging as a big space in which air taxis will actually become very common in the next few years. And that's exactly what this picture represents. Now, if you keep this idea in mind, and then you now say, can I actually work on what's called as mid-air recharging? And I think people would have seen a couple of weeks back, there is already a company that is talking about wireless power transmission, right? So wireless power transmission actually is a technology that exists. It's just that the electrical guys are always looking at something like 98% efficiency, as their motors and all that stuff is like 95, 98% efficiency. Whereas the engine guys are actually very happy with a 44% efficiency. This is like a huge chasm. Whereas wireless power charging might actually have something like about 90% efficiency, and the electrical guys are not happy. The reason is, if they increase things into the megawatt level, this 10% deficit in the efficiency can give rise to a significant amount of heating that they have to worry about. That's again the reason why you shouldn't be first of all transmitting megawatts worth of electricity. Think about only kilowatts or much less, right? If you're able to do that with a massive plane that goes from, let's say, Chennai to Bangalore, and nobody goes to the airport anymore, the Meenambakam here or the Devanahalli airport over there, but we take off from our rooftop or our doorstep or somewhere near the street, where you get into an air taxi, right, as if you will actually go across the city, except that the air taxi does not have the range required for you to go all the way to Bangalore or Hyderabad or wherever it is. But you have this mother aircraft that takes off in a scheduled time, and all the other aircraft that want to go to the other city kind of swarm in a what's called as an inverse form to this, and then you now have this mid-air recharging that continuously charges these aircraft, right? And then when you go to the destination city, all of them kind of split apart and go to their respective doorsteps, rooftops, and street corners, which essentially means that you don't need airports at all. Nobody goes to an airport anymore, and so on. No security checks, no malls, nothing, right? So you suddenly have infrastructurized the whole. And this is what actually I would call as ubiquitous flying, which means that I don't need these massive highways, I don't need all these big train stations and all of that. You simply can get on a plane and go to whatever city you want. Now, that said, if you now look at the transportation communication analogy, I don't have that slide here, but typically the landline is where you would actually be talking about trains. That means like you have to lay railway tracks and then run the train, similar to laying cables for the phone. The mobile phone was actually the equivalent of the aviation that I'm talking about. That means like you had only the mobile phone towers here and there, and then there's communication. Similarly, you have only the touch points of landing and takeoff, and everything happens in the air. So you don't need any more infrastructure. But you still have things like fiber optic cables for communication, data communication, and that's where, if I have to do a proper land-based transportation, I better do a very good job of it. That means I have to now invest in the fifth mode of transportation, which is Hyperloop, that can go even faster than aircraft, right? And what we are trying to do here is to essentially set up a intercity metro. So where we are actually talking about metro as a huge infrastructure item for a city, it's okay to actually think about a intercity metro. That means, is it possible for me to actually go from Chennai to Bangalore in 15 minutes, right? So here, this is the example talks about 16.5 minutes. Okay, right? So 10% more, fine. But is it possible for, and then go from the middle of Chennai to middle of Bangalore, not to some Devanahalli airport that's far away and all of that stuff. And then from there, you have to go elsewhere and so on, right? So this is the next level that we have to be thinking about. And as you know, the Avishkar Hyperloop team has been working on this, and they have been making some progress through the pandemic as well. We will talk about it some other time, right? So all these things are about that. Is it possible to disrupt rocketry and then satellite launching? That's the next thing, right? So what Agnikul tries to do is, again, 3D printed rockets, and their job is to go for a posting a 100 kg satellite. That's again a small satellite. Satellites are becoming very small, and we are now going towards constellation of satellites instead of a single large satellite. Again, that's a infrastructure that's happening. And as I said, we have been working on 3D printed combustors at the NCCRD, and that's being taken off through by Agnikul. Now, with having small rockets, all of a sudden we don't need these huge launch pads like you have seen with ISRO or the NASA and so on. We can actually launch out of containers and trucks, right? So truck-based. So that means like all I need is just a barren land, and can be any part of the world. I can simply ship my rocket and launch it in, right? What else can be done, right? What we are ideating here is it possible for us to actually use the rocket science of aluminum water reactions for using in desalination and actually adopting it with human urine, right? So if you are able to actually use the human urine and human feces for energy generation then and there, and get clean water out of it for recycling, we can have standalone toilets, which will simply mean that we don't need drainage pipelines, we don't need sewage pipelines anymore, and we can simply distribute these toilets everywhere, and they will be self-contained. The other thing is, you have seen a lot of these advertisements for what's called as personalized air conditioner. That means like there is a small cooler that is blowing cool air into your face. We want to go one step further and see is it possible for us to actually make wearable air conditioners. The challenge here is how long can it last? So in a hot summer day, if you are actually trying to take a bike and putting a helmet, it becomes very, very stuffy in Chennai. Is it possible for me to keep my body cool? If I were to do that, then look at the CLT. Why would actually want to air condition the entire auditorium when only the bodies have to be kept cool? Right? So we are actually working on ideas like 3D printed wearable air conditioners. So I want to actually get back very quickly to the theme that I was talking about. So Kennedy's quote is, "Ask not what your country can do, ask what you can do for your country." So my point essentially is that don't ask what your government can do for you, just go do it yourself locally. And for you to be able to do that, you should be able to develop the technology that can allow you to afford to do that. So what we are essentially doing at NCCRD is to have a studied irreverence towards conventional wisdom, and we want to actually develop high tech that can democratize access to high standard of living through what I call as infrastructure. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, sir. It was really great to hear your insights, which are really fascinating, and really we had a small trip to the future. Yeah. So now we shall have a small Q&A session. People are free to ask the questions to our professor. You can either speak out or put it in the chat box.
Hi, sir. Good evening. This is Akhil.
Yeah.
Sir, I have a question regarding these electric vehicles and their recharging infrastructure. Like today, lithium-ion batteries are being widely used in electric vehicles, right? And we need electrical recharging infrastructure. And today, each company is having their own infrastructure facility.
Yeah.
So, like, how do you think creating this infrastructure is going to help India? It is going to be very high budget project, right?
Absolutely.
So can you throw a light on what we can do to make it defrastructure?
That's a very good question. So so it turns out, like as I said, Tamil Nadu is one of those sort of developed states in some sense, particularly technologically. So I had a chance to talk to the electricity board chairman, and they were actually not in favor of the infrastructure because they have already invested in the infrastructure in reaching the last mile with all the cables and so on. But over time, they understand that it may be actually cheaper for people to produce their own power. Then the question is, what do they do? Right? Where is their role? So the answer I gave them was, you actually have to be an electricity management board and not a generation and distribution board. But they have a technological answer in which they basically believe that they will be spending a lot of their time and effort in setting up the infrastructure required for this charging. Okay, because that is, the fast charging is where you will actually require the high power, because you need to have a lot of electricity transmitted to the batteries. And they think that they can produce that high power when compared to what's possible for individuals to generate with their own rooftops or this microgrids and all of that stuff. So there is like a shift from what people will do by themselves to produce their own power to what the government will do in trying to produce the power that is required for this recharging, and they are gearing up to set it up. In fact, there is a government mandate for doing this. Now, having said that, I am basically advocating that we shouldn't actually depend on the government to do all these things, right? So that means that you should not require this infrastructure and so on. My sense is, this is an emerging story, and in fact, I did not have this opinion that I'm just going to give you until about even a couple of months back, or maybe about even 1 month back. But look at what's going on. As of today, electric vehicles are still more expensive when compared to the combustion vehicles, right? And they are actually struggling to have a offtake because of the infrastructure requirement on charging, and they have something called the range anxiety that they have to go with, and all of those things. And this is simply because we are using lithium ion. Now, lithium ion at the most is probably in the next 10 years is expected by experts, not me, to have a energy density of about 260 watt hour per kg. Right now it's at around 200 or so. 250 could be a very, very expensive battery, but you can actually push to about 30% more, which will be about 260 watt hour per kg. In the early 90s, lithium ion basically started as a commercially viable product for pocket electronics. So at that time, we had something called Walkman, where you will put a cassette and play, and then this became like a Discman, where you would put a CD and play, and then it became iPods and all of that stuff. And the pocket electronics eventually was becoming mobile phones, smartphones, laptops, all of that. What we have done today is to grow this into a massive architecture and in a brute force way, trying to fit into something as big as a vehicle. Now, that's not obviously right. So what is going on, and you will see this happen very rapidly in the next 2 to 3 years. There are a lot of green shoots that indicate this. People will actually shift to a different chemistry. And there are other chemistries, battery chemistries, that actually offer much higher energy densities than lithium ion. And the moment you do this, you will be able to actually pack sufficient battery that will not require you to have this range anxiety anymore. And that essentially means that you don't need as much infrastructure for recharging on the way, right, in the future, as what is being talked about today. So as the government tries to gear up, and then they will probably not to do a great job, and there will always be a lag in the infrastructure and so on, not just Indian government, anywhere in the world, right? There will be a lag. We will have technology that will actually catch up ahead of it and then say, we don't need that infrastructure. That is the infrastructure that we have to be looking at, correct? So this is a balance that we will strike in the next 5 to 10 years. This is my outlook.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. And one more extension to what you said, and just my opinion.
Yeah.
What if there is a different chemistry other than lithium battery,
Yeah.
where public can come forward to install this infrastructure? For example, today IOCL is producing petrol, diesel, everything,
yes,
but it won't set up the bunks on its own, right?
Yeah.
Public will come forward, spend some money, and like IOC will also get some money, and people who set up the infrastructure will also gain from it. So do you think in batteries also, if there is any such chemistry that allows public to come forward and set up infrastructure, that will be rapid infrastructure growth and also win-win situation, right? Do you support that?
Indeed. So what's happening? This question that you're asking is actually independent of the chemistry. So, for example,
Yes.
when a electricity board is actually bothering about producing power that is meant for recharging, the actual delivery will be made by bunks, like the petrol bunks that we have today.
Yes.
Right. So that is going to spawn a new line of jobs that will essentially replace the old jobs of petrol bunks. And
Yes.
the last mile delivery of that power will be privatized, and like what you're talking about. So the final act of actually having to recharge will be in the public's hands back again.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Guys, is there any other question?
Am I audible?
Yes, Sachin, you're audible.
Yeah, it was a very question regarding the combined heat and power.
Yeah. I think I had a slide there.
Even today, the government are taking initiatives like we must have heard about the zero of energy efficiency, that they give credits carbon footprint which reduce.
Yeah.
So when this suppose it takes place, so how is the carbon footprint or the of pollution which is affecting the environment? So will that be also addressed in this platform? It will be.
Yes, indeed. That's exactly what I started by saying, with giving the example of the rooftop solar as a what do you call, a choice that people will make over a backyard thermal power plant, right? But actually, what you're asking for is about the backyard thermal power plant. That is, if it's possible for me to use a combined heat and power as a captive power plant in things like factories and so on. So let's understand two things about environmental sustainability. One is pollution. The other one is carbon footprint. Pollution is in terms of things like smoke, NOx, SOx, CO emissions. These are actually harmful to health right then and there. It actually affects the local population, right? Carbon emission is in terms of carbon dioxide and steam. And steam is okay because it will condense and drain back. That's not a big deal. But carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas that will stay in the environment, and it pollutes. Now, the question essentially is it good or bad, right? Now, the important thing to understand is to close the carbon cycle. It is not to actually eliminate carbon that we have to fight. It is to close the carbon cycle. So that's exactly where, if you're actually producing the combined heat and power using biomass, for example, where you have trees that are taking back the carbon dioxide that is being emitted, right? So you have a balance between the amount of tree cover that's available that produces the biomass for you to be able to run this combined heat and power. You're okay. You're going to actually cap the amount of carbon dioxide that's there in the environment. Of course, we have actually gone to precipitous levels, and we have to cap and roll back. And that's where a lot of other forms of energy will allow us to actually roll back. But you don't need to actually go back to zero. Okay, so you have to cap at a point where you are able to strike a balance where the planet's heating to 1 degree or 2 degree or within that can be managed. So this has to be thought out on that's a global effect, but locally we have to try to come up with technologies that does that balance. I don't know if you heard me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Also, we have another question from Rahul. He's an MS scholar in Ocean Engineering Department, and he's asking that how should he think in terms of creating value as a business, since the ideas presented here are different fields.
Correct. So that's a very important question. I'm actually very thankful to him for asking this question, because that's one of the purposes of this particular talk in this forum, right? As I told you right in the beginning, doing research is one part. Developing technology from it is another part. I'll tell you exactly where it is, right? So when you now do a research, you write a paper at the end of it. In the paper, you write a first paragraph where you're talking about the technological applications of your research. And that's essentially a lip service. After that, you find a paper, and then the reason why this actually is because of the to make the engine, somebody ocean engineering, right? Somebody will make the ship.
Excuse me, sir. Sir, your voice is breaking.
Can you hear me?
So your voice is breaking for 5 minutes, for past 5 minutes. Oh, sorry, 2 minutes.
Are we okay now? I can probably stop.
Yeah. Yes, sir. It is okay. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So can I repeat my response?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes. So what I was basically saying is, when you have this massive infrastructure paradigm that we have been used. It's actually okay for a research scholar to observe responsibility. Can you hear me again?
So the voice is
It's all good,
breaking.
sir.
Yeah. So what happens is like research with the first paragraph that shows application, look at address a couple of these gaps, and then write the paper. Maybe you addressed it, but you didn't even solve any problem at the end of it, and then you get your degree and then you move on. Okay, so whereas research has to actually be going towards a technology development. And the moment we now say we can do a infrastructure, small tech, small product and stuff, we can actually treat things in that. So all of a sudden, we will find that units and research labs and research market, right? Develop a technology. From there, you have to package a product, and that product has to have a business case. That means it has to be sellable. You have to be able to make money with it. It can't be too expensive, right? There is a life cycle cost that you have to understand how to do. So there is so much more than just doing the research for you to be able to have an economic value put to it, right? And fortunately for us in IIT Madras, we have a lot of this ecosystem like e-cell or Nirmaan or the GDC and all of that stuff, which actually imparts this additional level of knowledge. There is still a gap. You have a research idea. For you to be able to develop the technology and make a product, you still need something that doesn't exist. And I'm trying to actually see if I can put that together, right? As an extension or a what do you call a bigger version of what we are doing at NCCRT, right? But ultimately, let's say you don't really require too much of the local infrastructure within the lab for you to be able to do that, like what we have in NCCRT. We still need to do much more in NCCRT for be able to, for affording this, right? So, but our startups are somehow getting that done. The most important thing is the idea from the research to the product and its business case. So an entrepreneur actually has to worry unless you have a business case, don't venture into any technology. That's exactly what I would say.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thanks a lot, sir. We also have another question from Satyanarayan. He's asking that there are a lot of scope for microgas turbine development and its products. Where do we have to approach for funding part? Cost requirement also will be high to set up the facilities.
Well, it is high, but we have to actually show the business case. That means if it's possible for you to, so deep tech funding comes again from deep tech investors. So there are a set of people who are bought on this idea of deep tech investment, and these are private investors. Go talk to them, go find out, and then say, this is my business case. If I actually put this kind of investment over this much period, I will be able to make this much money, and it will take so much time for break even, and I'll actually give you return on investment beyond this point. So make that business case and go talk to private investors, right? That's the way it has to be done. Again, saying that government has to fund me and all those things. Well, maybe for a center like what we are doing at NCCRT to flourish without the entrepreneurial guys having to run around for getting machining done or getting some fancy metal 3D printing done and all those things. We want to actually have a setup that will enable all of that under one roof. But that is actually not for the microgas turbine alone. Right? The microgas turbine alone should actually make a business case for which you should be able to attract investors. If you are not able to actually, that's what I said in the previous sentence, the previous response. If you have a technology that does not have a proper business case, don't do it. Right? You have to be able to command funding based on the business case itself.
Okay, guys, is there any other questions which you want to ask our professor?
I thought I'll just add to the previous question. If Thanavarajan is actually interested in the business case of the micro gas turbines that we are developing, I am happy to talk to him on the phone.
There seems to be no other questions.
Right.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, sir, for joining us today. And yeah, like we had really conceptual and more in detailed insights from you, and it was really fascinating, sir. Thank you once again, sir.
Thank you very much. Thanks for doing this show. It's very nice.
Yeah.
Thanks all the audience, and bye-bye.
Yes, sir. And now that a Q&A session and our session is about to end. And before ending the session, we have a couple of announcements for you guys. Firstly, we have planned fascinating talks in the upcoming weekend from entrepreneurs who are research scholars once upon a time. We'll let you know about the talks through the mail. More details about the talks through the mail. Secondly, we have created a WhatsApp group exclusively for PG Janta on discussion of entrepreneurship related initiatives as well as activities. We have sent that WhatsApp group invite via chat box. Please join that WhatsApp group for getting more information related to entrepreneurship initiatives. And if you didn't fill the feedback form, please do scan the QR code, or I'll just share my screen again. Else you could just click on that link and you could fill the form. Yeah, I hope everyone scanned it or filled it either way. Fill the QR. Okay. Yeah, so we are nearing the end of the session, and yeah, thanks a lot everyone for attending this session, and hope we will see all of you in the upcoming talks. And lastly, stay home everyone and stay safe. Bye guys.